Welcome to another edition of the Soundcast. And konnichiwa, everyone. Christopher Coleman here with Tracksounds.com with another special interview edition of the Soundcast. This time, our interviewee is composer Joris De Man, who has written the score for the newly released game, the highly anticipated Killzone 2, which has just been released and has been getting much love from the critics and much love from those who've already gotten to play it. And I will count myself among them starting tomorrow when my copy gets to my house and I commence wasting hours of my day over the next few weeks to try to finish the thing. I'm really looking forward to it. The music you hear in the background now was written by Joris De Man and is a part of the Killzone 2 soundtrack. In the course of our interview, he does talk about the potential for an official release of the score, and let me tell you, if you like grab you by the head, twist you around, punch you in the face, thematic, orchestral kind of music, you're gonna love this. And let's just hope that there's going to be an official soundtrack release. He also shares about his experience in coming back to the franchise. Of course, he wrote the score for the very first game, Killzone, a number of years ago, and now he's back, and he compares and contrasts his experience this time out with his first run at it. And I think you're gonna find this interview very interesting and entertaining. It's been a couple years since Killzone. What was it like coming back into the franchise and revisiting that music that you established a couple years ago?
Well, I mean, it was almost like, meeting an old friend in a way, which sounds incredibly corny, but I suppose it's still true. You've lived with that franchise for a while. I mean, I used to work as a musical director at Guerrilla, so I was part of the franchise, so to speak. And then a few years ago, I kind of branched out on my own and decided that I wanted to go freelance. So it was nice to kind of return to a kind of a familiar ground, and I realized that it's a style and a type of music that I'm very comfortable in. And also just really nice to see what the people have done at Guerrilla with the franchise, because obviously there's Killzone 1, which kind of set it up, set the whole storyline and all the characters up, and then there's Liberation, which was kind of a continuation, but at the same time, because it wasn't quite a first person, it was a third person shooter and not a first person shooter, and so story wise they did a few different things with that. And so I think Killzone 2 is more of a return to form compared to Killzone 1. And so it was really great to kind of come back to that and see what they'd done with it in terms of the characters and in terms of the environments. And so it was great to be back on familiar ground and to kind of see whether I could take it to another level, retain some of the themes that we had for Killzone 1, and at the same time musically trying to do something that was a bit more beefy and a bit more meaty than perhaps the first one.
Right. Well, now this time it's on PS3, of course, with a lot of increased power for you to work within with the music. What did it allow you to do, or what could you take advantage of now that you are working on a game that was going to be a PS3 game?
Well, I mean, the first thing that's apparent is kind of the audio quality. Is that you're kind of able to use higher bit rates for the music. We're actually able to use full surround sound for the music now as well, as opposed to kind of Dolby Pro Logic, which is kind of surround but not true surround. In this case we could go up to 7.1, and I think a lot of the game environments and stuff are in 7.1. Some of the music is 5.1, because music-wise 5.1 and 7.1 isn't really going to have a huge bearing on what the music sounds like. So, but just to be able to use full 5.1 surround sound, made it quite a big difference to it. And also there was just more scope for the music. This time around we weren't just stuck to doing cutscene music, which partially on Killzone 1 was a creative decision, but it was also a technical issue that we really couldn't really have any kind of in-game music, because there was so much level streaming going on that playing music on top of that with the in-game sound effects and ambience and stuff just wasn't really quite feasible on the PlayStation 2. And of course now with Blu-ray and the power of the PlayStation 3 and being able to use better compression for the music basically meant that we could do all those things. And so we kind of looked at the game and decided where we're going to use music and how we're going to use it, and so realized that we could actually have in-game music, and that it was actually helping the game, was adding kind of, to the overall experience. And so that's why we kind of decided to have both. And so we ended up using orchestral music for the cutscenes and MIDI music for the in-game music, and have that music be, the in-game music be interactive as well.
Right. Well, how do you go about that when you know you have to tackle a project like this? Do you obviously you have your thematic stuff that some you've carried over from the first game, but do you write your in-game music first, or do you write your cut sequence, their big symphonic stuff first, or do you do them simultaneously?
Well, for me so far the way it's worked is that usually the in-game music happens first, and then the cutscene music comes in at the end. And there's that's mainly a practical reason, because in Killzone 2 all of the cutscenes are done using in-game technology, so they're kind of, I would almost call them live cutscenes. They're not pre-rendered, they're all using the in-game engine and using the in-game characters. Everything except the first main introduction cutscene, which is kind of a Killzone tradition to have that rendered and have that kind of set up the story, and then everything else is done using in-game technology. And because that in-game technology is dependent on a number of factors, like if a story takes place in a certain level and that level is still being designed or still being tweaked, or the graphics team decides that some of the environments need to change, or some story element has changed, which means that that has bearing on what the level looks like, then obviously that has an effect on the cutscenes, because if let's say something's taking place on the spaceship, and suddenly the game designers decide, well, actually no, this section is not going to take place in the spaceship, we're actually going to do that a level later on, so this cutscene actually needs to take place in a desert, then you would have a really weird situation if the cutscene would still be on the spaceship. And so they're kind of beholden to the game designers and everybody else who's kind of involved in that process to get those levels finished before they can finish the cutscenes. And so it kind of makes sense to then have the cutscenes, the music and stuff take place at the end as well, because then we kind of know that they're finalized. So I spent the majority of the time working on the in-game music, because there was quite a lot of it, and it was interactive, which kind of brings its own set of challenges. And then we tackled the cutscene music at the end, and that was, it was a reasonably compressed schedule for that, but again, that's not unusual in game development, and I've never really had it any other way, so that's kind of how it goes.
So you only had, from what I've gathered, only a few weeks to do this project, is that right?
Only the cutscenes. The actual in-game music, I had quite a few months to work on that. I'm actually, a few months, actually quite a bit more than that. Basically, from the beginning of 2008, kind of March, April, kind of started working on it and started working out how we were going to use the interactive music. I mean, there was a bit of R&D involved in that as well, as to how we're going to do this interactive music. There's different ways you can tackle it, and so there was a bit of toing and froing of saying how we're going to do this music, and let's do a few tests and see how it works. And once that system was in place, and once we decided how we were going to do it, then it was actually getting down to composing it and looking at the levels and kind of deciding what kind of music was going to go there and how it was going to work.
You've been listening to a special preview edition of the Soundcast. Full episodes of the Soundcast can be found at Tracksounds.com.